Hey everybody, thanks for coming to the KEV Talks podcast. On this episode, I'm going to provide kind of a review, but mostly the tips and tricks that I got and really life helping tools from watching the Netflix documentary Stutz, S-T-U-T-Z. It was directed by Jonah, who also stars in it. He has his psychiatrist, Phil Stutz. So I hope you enjoy this one. It's really good. It's on Netflix. Go check it out. More to come in this episode, but first, let's do a little bit of house cleaning. Thanks everybody for coming to listen to the KEV Talks podcast. I am Kevin Pinnell. I'm your host. I'm a senior project manager in the healthcare IT space. And on this show, I share the stories of intriguing people through great discussions or give my 2 cents based on my experience, share industry best practice processes from healthcare technology, public safety, wellness, in hopes to make you, the listener, and me make progress. So thanks so much for being here. If you want to learn more or sign up, get updates when episodes are released, go to kevtalkspod.com. I also, as part of KPNL Productions, have the Jiu-Jitsu, YU-JITSU podcast, where I share tips and tricks for aspiring or brand new Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, and Pinnell 5 Fitness Club channel on YouTube. So check those out. Thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let's fly right into it. In candid conversations with actor Jonah Hill, leading psychiatrist Phil Stutz explores his early life experiences and unique visual model of therapy. So that is the kind of detailed, or really summary, I guess, from Stutz on the Netflix website. Again, it's really good. It just came out, so go check that out. So what I'm going to start sharing now are some of the notes that I took. I have a notebook, a podcast notebook that I use, journal, if you will. And so when I started watching this, I immediately was like, man, this is great stuff. So started capturing as much as I could. So let's jump into it. These are some of the tools that Phil Stutz used. The first is index cards for patients. Lets them kind of draw what they're thinking, either in pictures or write things. And drawing is very therapeutic. I remember when I was younger, I used to draw all the time, mostly comic book things. But if you think about it, or when I've been stressed out or anxious or something, there's those coloring books, right, where you color these patterns and it really takes your mind off maybe the stress or the anxiety or whatever you've got. Well, in these index cards for patients, you can kind of draw what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And it seemed to be a therapeutic thing. And again, during this, Jonah Hill is really interviewing Phil Stutz, who's his psychiatrist, and he's talking about what he's used, which is kind of a cool perspective when you're watching this. The other great perspective that Phil Stutz dives into, and we've all heard this, right, is what's the difference between, as Phil Stutz says, so if you're a psychiatrist out there, not my word, but he calls himself a shrink, right, which we've probably heard that word before, and the difference between what a shrink does and what friends do. And so if you're having problems, next time you're talking to your friends, think about how quickly they give you advice, right? How quickly they may or may not say, oh, well, you should do this, or don't worry about that, or something. And not that they're bad friends, but what's the difference? So the difference being, as they talk about in here, is a shrink will listen, right? A shrink is paid to listen to you and let you talk and let you figure some things out. And your friends give you advice, right? And so sometimes you don't need the advice or want the unsolicited advice, but that's also kind of a thing that Phil Stutz talks about, which is in the mental health or psychiatry business, is for years psychiatrists say, oh, you just need to sit there and listen and just let the patient work it out on their own, and then kind of give them some tips here and there. And he said that's bullshit, right? That's his words. He's like, you're here. And so the example he gave is some guy that says, in all these other areas I'm successful, but this other one, I'm lazy, I don't do this, whether it was exercise or work, I don't recall. But he says, okay, stop talking, here's what you need to do. And he gives them advice, right? You're not there just to have a quiet room. And while that's a modality of therapy, I guess, and can work for some folks, Phil Stutz's thought is you're here for a reason, and it's for me to help you. So again, I thought that was pretty neat and noted just the difference, right? Shrinks listen, friends give advice. The other thing to talk about is your life force and the components that make it up, and that's the body, people, and the self. And so we'll start from the bottom. So picture a triangle, and at the bottom of that is your body, right? Your physical body. So imagine you're anxious, depressed, you're just stressed out, or you're great, right? Whatever, is that your body needs things, right? And we're not doing Maslow's hierarchy, but what he talks about is the body from your life force, right? Your physical body. You need exercise. You need a good diet. You need to get sleep, right? And sleep being 85% of your health, roughly, which is what they talk about. But it's critically important. And I talked about that on a previous episode, particularly cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So if you're having trouble sleeping, go check that out. Extremely helpful to get a handle on your sleep. It changes every aspect of your life. The next up in the triangle, the middle, is people. What are our relationships with people? And this, can represent the human race, as they talk about, but also, handholds and connecting with other humans, or figuratively, are you holding your hands or needing your hands held a lot, or are you taking initiative? And so, or the other people taking initiative. So it's that whole interaction, right? And if you've been in a conversation with anyone, sometimes they lead the conversation, sometimes you do at work, who, takes the initiative to get stuff done, who needs their hand held. And so that whole kind of human interaction dynamic they talk through a little bit. And then understanding the self, right? Especially with, your unconscious or your consciousness, and writing and looking in the mirror. And they talk about, and I'll talk about some of the tools they talk to address that. But, the body being the base, right? And I think that's a thing that maybe a lot of folks don't consider, is that your physical health, right? Exercising, eating better, sleeping, has such a tremendous impact, positive or negative, on how you interact with other people or don't, which it can affect your anxiety or just your mood, your happiness, your anger, whatever. And then ultimately at the top of the pyramid, yourself, right? So how you identify with yourself and in your mind is so directly connected with your physical well-being. And because if you don't feel good, if you're generally unhealthy, then there's probably a good chance that your attitude's not great, and overall your mental health isn't super. So that was a neat kind of pyramid triangle, where they talked about the body, people, and self from the bottom up. Then they talk about, and this is pretty well in order, I'm going in the order of my notes here, part X, right? And this is where adversity comes in, and it's the judgment part of you that wants to block your success, right? And this may not be a conscious thing, but it's there. And, so is there another level you could take your work? Is there another level, for example, let's say, is there another level I could take for this podcast, right? Could I get a professional intro? Yes. Could I, hire someone to edit this? Probably. But is my part X blocking me from that because maybe it's not comfortable because I have a day job? Like, there's all these different factors. And so that part X, you've got to look at. But what's the evolution of that? And as they say, I guess I'll mark this episode explicit, but as they say in the thing, it will fuck up your shit, right? So if you let that part X take over and keep blocking you, it'll stop you from taking care of those three things in the triangle we talked about. It'll stop you from taking care of your body because you're like, oh, I'm not in shape, I can't go to the gym, or I'm not in shape enough to start this sport, and then I can't talk to people because I'm too nervous, or people don't like me. And then with yourself, you'll just keep down talking yourself, kind of like I talked about that book Unfuck Yourself, right, where it talks about I will or I will not statements, and how you talk to yourself matters. So you got to really look at your part X and address it and evolve it, but it's always going to be there. It's never going to go away. And kind of related to that, they talk about three aspects of reality: pain, uncertainty, and constant work. So this wasn't in Stutz, but it was a great quote that I just found, and it's from Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. There is no normal life that is free of pain. It is the very wrestling with our problems that can be the impetus for our growth. Again, not in Stutz, but I thought that was awesome. And it's relevant, right? Because just reality is there's pain. There's physical pain, there's mental pain, there's emotional pain. It's just going to happen. And part of what they talk about is learning to accept that, but again, learning tools to deal with it that are related to those things we talked about: your physical health, mental, and personal relationships. Uncertainty. This is something I've certainly, I'm a planner, I'm a doer. I like to solve problems. And uncertainty, if you've seen Zero Dark 30, the intelligence analyst that's been tracking bin Laden for so long is wanting them to do the raid on the compound. And she's like, I know uncertainty freaks you guys out, but it's 100%, right? So uncertainty is a way of life, and it's just something we can't get past. And that hit me hard, because the uncertainty I have about either my health, which is pretty good, it's just, a life thing, and I'm 48, or with family members' health, with what's going to happen tomorrow, with job environments changing, and just all this uncertainty is just a way of life. So getting to a point where you can start to say, yeah, that's going to happen. And gosh, what hit me in the face. And again, I would encourage you all to listen to the Unfuck Yourself book, or audio, or read the book. Is the last part of that book, the last chapter that I listened to the other day, has to do with you're going to die. There's no getting around it. At some point, it's going to happen. And the uncertainty of death looms over everyone. It's one of the top fears for all humans, right? But the way that he explained it was so certain, right? So, and looking back to say, okay, with uncertainty, are you going to regret that you went on those trips? Are you going to regret that you got in better shape? No, you're going to regret that you didn't go anywhere, and you're going to regret that you were out of shape and you were in pain forever, right? And so, anyway, kind of stuck on uncertainty, but that's the one I think that hits a lot of people. And then constant work, right? There's no free rides. Sometimes it looks like it on Instagram or Facebook or wherever all the, pretty people and all the rich folks pose. But, work has to happen to really get success. And you got to learn about what success is. And it could be constant work just to get water, depending on where you're on the world, let alone success and money and housing and all that kind of stuff. But so 3 aspects of reality that they talk about: pain, uncertainty, and constant work. I'll try and keep summarizing these as I go so you can get the bullets. And really what's related to that is someone trying to establish greatness. And at this point of the movie, they're about through talking about, Jonah Hill and his challenges. And he's had weight and health challenges that he's addressed his whole life. But also talking about trying to be a successful actor, right? And that saying, well, I'm nervous to do this, or I'm not going to try that because I won't be successful, or I won't get this part or something. And great line. It's not really a line, but it's just true and kind of related to Brene Brown's vulnerability kind of angle. But Phil Stutz says you can't move forward without being vulnerable. And so there's no need to set up greatness, he says, too, because you can't hide behind perfection. Right? In the program and project management world and incident management responding, I've used the quote and the term, perfect is the enemy of good. And that applies here too. Don't hold what you're trying to achieve in whatever field it's in, or whether it's fitness or work or something else, up on such a high pedestal that you never step towards it, that you're hiding behind perfection because of maybe what you see or online or who you talk to. There is no perfect. Just take a little step and try and get better. And that can be a challenge, but I think we can all do it. And to that point, they then talk about, and really, again, that had to do as well during the documentary. There's kind of a twist, and I don't really want to give it away, but let's just say it changes the nature of the movie and the aspect that we see Jonah Hill in. So I won't spoiler alert the whole thing, but at that point where they talk about where you have to be vulnerable to move forward, what they're talking about is Jonah Hill in this movie. And so kind of be aware of that. Just watch it, enjoy it, but it's a pretty cool turn, and they do a great job in how they kind of switch things up. So how do we take that next step? What do we do according to Stutz and Jonah Hill? There's a string of pearls concept, and that is to just put the next pearl in the string. Each pearl is an action, right? The string is life. The string is going on. Each pearl is an action that we must take, and all actions count, they say, right? Small actions, big actions. And this is advice. I'm pretty active on Reddit, and whether it's in project management subreddit there, or anxiety, mental health, program management, whatever, I follow a whole bunch of them and trying to give my 2 cents, and then take, information for myself as well and share that with you all here. But a lot of folks think they can take no action because they're so depressed or anxious, or they're new to the position, or they're transitioning to a new position, or they don't like their position. But we can all take actions, right? We can take little ones. We can take that first step to get outside. We can take the action to ask for help or go get help. A funny aspect of this string of pearls concept is that within each pearl, there's a dark circle, and this is shown, it's illustrated in the movie, and the dark circle's a turd, they say. Well, that's just because nothing's perfect, but that's fine because life isn't perfect, right? And so it doesn't need to be. And in this imperfection, the next concept they talk about is the shadow, right? And this is the part of us that we're ashamed of, right? That we try to hide, that we're rejected, maybe something happened to us. And the exercise they do in here is to say to talk to your shadow, right? Your shadow still needs attention from you. And so it's a way to look inward and say, let's say, for example, I'll use myself as an example. When I was in the Navy, I went to dive school for the dive medical technician program. So I qualified for it. I was in pretty good shape. I did decent on the tests, but I failed out because of an open water swim, a bay swim where you swim on your back. You can't use your arms. And it's like 1,000 yards or meters. I forget which. It was pretty cold, but I hadn't prepared for it. And I don't think that was it. I think it was that I really didn't want that. I wanted something else, but I went, which sounds odd to go to one of the kind of elite schools in the Navy. But my shadow from that is that I didn't say I quit. I missed my time, but somewhere along the line, could I have really pushed myself if I really wanted to be there and made it? I'll never know, but that shadow part of me is from a failure. And that could come from, a bunch of different things, from being bullied, from, being heavyset and then being, treated poorly or having low self-esteem or whatever. But that shadow stays with you. And what they talk about is don't neglect it, right? It needs attention. It'll kind of fester, right? If you let it go, and it can kind of overtake and upset some of the stuff we talked about before, especially that self, that top of the pyramid above body, people and body. And so your shadow is going to be there, and you have to address it, and you have to take care of it and give it care, just like you do your normal self, the rest of yourself. Next, as the movie goes on, we learn about the maze, and this comes from part X, that part that wants you to fail and hold you up. And what this has to do, if you can imagine a line, right, like a line graph, and life is the flat line going to the right, toward your age. And if you veer off an arrow, boom, it's going upwards. That's forward motion in life. That's making progress in your health, in your family life, in your well-being, in your job, and whatever. And then boom, going down at the same rate, or what could happen is the maze, where you get lost in that, where part X is trying to fight you. And so being conscious of, when is part X, that part that's trying to mess your stuff up, saying, oh no, you don't need to do that, or it's not perfect, so don't try that, versus I'm taking little steps, I'm getting up, I'm controlling my sleep better, I'm eating a little better today, I'm going to study a little harder for that meeting tomorrow for my exam, or whatever you're doing. So being really conscious of which way are you going. Are you going forward motion above the regular lifeline, or are you getting caught in the maze that can wind down below your lifeline and drag you down mentally and physically? And then you can practice active love, they say. And this is a tough one. So think about someone that you don't like, or someone that's mistreated you, someone that you feel you don't want to, or maybe can't forgive. And then think about and picture, as they talked about in the movie, the warm place, this great comfortable place of warmth, maybe snuggled under blankets in a cabin in the mountains where it's snowing, with a fire crackling, and you're just so warm and comfortable. And now think about that person that you hold a grudge against, that did you wrong, that for whatever reason you just don't like them. Now put them in that warm place that's your heart. And this is hard to do, right? This is a really hard to do thing, I think. It is for me. I don't know, a lot of folks that I just truly dislike, but it's an interesting exercise, I think, and to picture, right? So if you picture that super comfy, warm, whatever beverage you have, with a fire on the couch in a cabin in the snow, and it's so warm and comfortable, and you're like, man, this is great. And now think about applying that to somebody that you don't like so much. That's active love. That's saying, I'm going to project this warmth and this caring onto you. And they talk about that as a great therapeutic and helpful thing. Then they talk about making jokes where, and you may have done this, I know I've done this, you make jokes to repress emotion. I have this one starred because when I was a corpsman working in the intensive care unit at Bethesda Naval Hospital, we had the sickest patients right in the military, some of them, and I saw a lot of people die, old, young, anywhere in between, from trauma, from diseases, whatever. So you have that dark humor, they call it, but it really is to repress the emotion and the horribleness that comes with doing that work. Right. It's great work at times when you have someone that walks in after being in the hospital for 4 months, then a year later they walk in and they're doing great. But it's horrible when you lose somebody, especially when you work so hard. Part of what can deal with that, and which I didn't really use as much at the time, that I've learned a little over the years and then was reminded with this documentary, is radical acceptance. Right. So squeeze the juice out of any bad situation. Say it's a lemon, right? When life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, that whole thing. So squeeze all the juice out and think about what is meaningful in this horrible thing. And that's, again, super hard to do. You watch the news and there's tragedies everywhere, but what came out of it? I just did an episode and a post about an agreement now that folks in the city of Houston have, the public safety folks, that now we're going to promise to work together, which, well, the only reason that happened is because there was a horrible tragedy at a festival. Would it have happened for real if that didn't happen? I don't know. Sometimes it takes that to happen. And so if it's a small thing, you dropped a glass, okay, what good can happen? And it's hard to do in the time, you're emotional, whatever. But, thinking about big picture things, find something meaningful in something that's not going well. And I had an issue with my sleep for a little bit. And so what happens to me and many others is you get stuck in the cycle where all you can think about is how you can't sleep and I'm not sleeping good. And you're so upset about that. And so what you have to do is change your mindset. And I talked about this on the Can't Sleep episode as well, which you can find on kevtalkspod.com, is to stop freaking out over not sleeping, but also to be much more active in, I'm going to control how I wind down in the evenings. I'm going to cut down on screen time, all that kind of stuff. And then squeeze the juice out of it of saying, I got 5.5 hours uninterrupted. That's awesome. Okay, I got 6. Okay, I got 7. Okay, I got whatever else. And you get the point, right? You got to look at it a little more positive, or you just keep dragging yourself down. And one of the other kind of visual perspectives, right? That's a big focus of this movie they talk about, is the grateful flow and how the sun is always up there. So today where I am, it was miserable. It was cold. It was gray. It was rainy. But through those clouds on the other side of that rain, I know the sun's up there, but sometimes it's hard to see that, right? It's hard to see it emotionally. It's hard to really physically see it, literally, as they say, but it's there. And so if we can try and understand that behind that black cloud, or on the other side of this black cloud, this bad thing that's happening right now to me, or the thought process I have, there is sunshine. And so this reminds me again of Viktor Frankl, who quoted Nietzsche about, if you have your why, you can put up with or determine almost any how. So if you have your why, which is the sun somewhere through the cloud, then you can figure out how to make an ascent through that cloud and get to the sunshine. Phil Stutz then talks about how we all worry about loss and grief, and that's so true, and how we worry about it before it happens, right? So if we know someone is sick, if we are working on a patient and it doesn't look good, or whatever it could be, that we need to practice, or what's helpful to practice is unattachment, actually, or non-attachment, which is super hard, right? If it's a family member or a friend. But the visualization that he provides us is, imagine you're holding onto a tree branch and then you let go and then you fall onto the surface of the sun and then your physical body's gone, but you're kind of everywhere. And that visualization, is meant to help with the attachment of, or to, the other person, right? And I think this kind of has to do with faith, like I talked about, right, in another episode of, what do you believe, right? What do you believe will happen? Do you believe something will happen, that you'll see that person again, that they'll be around you spiritually, that you'll see them in heaven or whatever afterlife you believe in, or as part of nature or something like that? But I think with this also is that it matters on celebrating the good parts of the good times that you have, and having those times with folks as often as you can, right, while they're here. And that's super hard to do when you're worried about what could happen, or maybe know what could happen. But the non-attachment was an interesting article, or rather tool to me as well, to think about how to help let it go through a visual exercise. One of the last notes I have on this episode is that your heroes have struggles too, right? And not everybody that you think has it figured out has it figured out. And that's so true in this day of, like I mentioned earlier, social media looks perfect and it's great, and what you do and what you don't see. And honestly, that's why I've shared in the at Pinnell 5 Fit on YouTube my failures, when I miss repetitions, when I miss the ball and trying to toss to myself as part of a balance exercise or whatever. People need to know it's okay to fail, right? But I think what we also have to collectively know is that we got to keep trying and not give up when we fail, and keep pushing, and understand that you may put people and admire them and they're up on a pedestal, but they're not perfect, right? They have struggles. You don't know just because someone's rich. And Eric Thomas talked about this on Order of Man that I listened to. Just because someone's rich doesn't mean their family's super, right? Just because someone's poor doesn't mean their family's bad. And so that judgment that what you see online or on the news or, from afar when you're in person, you don't really know. We don't really know. So I really found this, and I actually while recording this, found that there's a deep dive on Netflix.com that I'll link to that goes through these tools, that goes through the processes that are in Stutz. And I hope my kind of primer was helpful. Do read this article, watch the movie. It's really good. It's really helpful whether you know you need help or you don't, or you just want to watch something entertaining and a good conversation. So hats off to Jonah Hill for being super vulnerable. Also, he does jiu-jitsu, so that's pretty awesome. And to Phil Stutz, who goes through some pretty painful stuff in his past, but he shares it with us, the viewers. And I'm glad I got to share my 2 cents and review, and hope this helped you all, the listener. And I'm going to have some great interviews coming up with folks where we'll talk about needs with public safety, some leadership lessons, some technology, a little bit of all that, right, in the areas that I've worked in. And again, to help interesting stories from people get out there to share those leading best practice processes and help us all make progress. So thanks so much. Please go visit the KevTalksPod.com website. You can connect with all the K-Penel Productions items like the Kev Talks Pod at Penel 5 Fit on YouTube, and the Jiu-Jitsu podcast for the folks that are interested or just starting Jiu-Jitsu. Remember, have a plan so you and your team can work together and know what to do. Stay informed with facts, not just fear, and get involved so you can help make a difference. Godspeed, everybody.